Our society is making it increasingly difficult for Christians to be this salt and light that we're called to be. Jesus says, you're the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You ever think of yourself as the lamp that lightens the world? You are the city on a hill. We are not to be kept hid. Our message is to be proclaimed. Metropolitan Joseph of the Antiochian Orthodox Diocese has written a wonderful, marvelous letter that I want to read to you regarding the March for Marriage this Saturday in Washington, D.C. Several priests have organized a website and an Orthodox gathering at the march as well, and a terrific website called Crown Them with Honor. Also, I wanted to address misconceptions which the world has put, even in the hearts of Orthodox Christians, about activity in the public square and about being a voice for Christ, both positively and negatively. Both are necessary. Jesus talked more about hell than he talked about heaven. He talked about both. Both are necessary. Both are part of the gospel message. Jesus talked far more about sin than he talked about virtue, specific sin. Both are part of the gospel message. If there is no such thing as the proclamation of sin, then what's the gospel for? So, as one priest put it, this march is in support of marriage, of course, normal, natural marriage. Marriage is modeled after Christ and his bride, the church. One priest wrote, many priests believe it's time for a national pan-Orthodox Christian movement. In Indiana, a journalist, to intentionally stir up controversy, went to several businesses. I don't know how many businesses this woman went to. She finally found the answer she wanted at a pizza place. She asked the pizza business, would you serve homosexuals? And of course, the Christian says, yes, of course. And a series of questions, a little more compromising and a little more compromising. The answer was always yes. The final question was, well, if you were specifically asked to cater a homosexual wedding, would you do this? Now, this is a pizza parlor. How many of you have ever been to a wedding reception? Keep your hands up if you've been to a wedding reception where the exclusive caterer was pizza. Okay? It is a ridiculous question. It's a setup. It's a setup. This pizza shop said, well, I would have to respectfully decline and refer them to someone else. Anyway, I'm just saying all that just to say this started because Indiana had a wonderful law respecting religious freedom, that no one can force me as a business owner to do something that apostatizes, denies my faith. I can't be forced to throw incense in front of Caesar, and I can't be forced to do something that compromises my moral convictions. I can't be forced to subscribe to Playboy, and I can't be forced to approve of whatever. And the pressure on the governor of Indiana is such that he chucked the law. He said he clarified it, but what he did is he made it worthless. I've always been amazed. There have been more changes in the United States over the last 50 years, such that it's absolutely true. The country I know and grew up in is not the country that Benjamin knows. I'm always kind of shocked that Christians who know about the sanctity of life are not as fervent or something about, let's say, abortion or any of the sanctity of life issues. And I think a good deal of it is because they grew up with it. It's normal life. That's America. You know, abortion is accepted. That's not the country I grew up in. The country I grew up in never would have elected a president who was a known adulterer. In the mid-70s, Richard Nixon recorded all his conversations in the White House. In there, the president himself cursed, used swear words. And the president himself not only cursed, but he swore in the Oval Office. And this was a controversy in itself. This is 1974, and it's a controversy that our president is cursing in the sanctity of the whole Oval Office. Okay? That's the country I grew up in. And now we slaughter babies, dismembering them on a daily basis to the tune of 1,700 babies a day. And we're proud of it. Many priests believe it's time for an Orthodox Christian movement, and it's growing among the Orthodox laity as well, thanks be to God. And what spurred it is this pizza parlor in Indiana being persecuted. And you talk about tolerance. If you want to see the definition of intolerance, then just look up GLBT on your website. No longer are they saying in the gay agenda that Christian beliefs should be respected. Rather, they're using words that churches must be forced to acknowledge. And they don't mean acknowledge, they mean sanction, bless, approve of, We have a lovely parsonage, we have a great building, but be very clear that I'm under no illusions. I believe the day is coming when all this will be taken away. It may not happen in my lifetime, but the changes in America are happening so fast, I think it could happen in my lifetime. And all this will be taken away, and we'll be back to meeting not just in homes, but in the basement of homes, because we have to meet clandestinely, because we actually say something with moral value to it, both positive and negative. Metropolitan Joseph, he wrote, "The Supreme Court has agreed to hear 4 new cases on same-sex marriage," marriage is in quotes, and, quote, "rule on the power of the states to ban same-sex marriages and to refuse to recognize such marriages performed in another state," unquote. Incidentally, this is exactly the way abortion came to be enshrined in our laws. A minority of states legalized abortion in the 1960s, and the Supreme Court came along January 22nd, 1973, and made it mandatory of all. Metropolitan Joseph writes, "The 3rd annual March for Marriage in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, April 25th is a peaceful rally. It is quite comparable to the March for Life. We ask that you would make every effort to attend the rally and to encourage others strongly to do likewise. A vibrant and clear message is needed from our church on the matter of the mystery of holy matrimony, as well as an enumeration upon God-blessed sexuality and gender roles towards the strengthening of family life. This action is necessary in order to dispel confusion which has been stirred up by our secular culture. This is what our nation's people need to see." And he goes on, it's a wonderful letter. He says, "The March of Marriage will fall within days of when the Supreme Court is expected to hear oral arguments on the cases before them that will decide the national legal status of same-sex, quote-unquote, marriage. We are clearly on the cusp of a historic Supreme Court decision that could mark a powerful affirmation of marriage between one man and one woman, upon which all major civilizations have always flourished, or it can initiate a direction which the Holy Orthodox Church can never embrace. Throughout the history of our faith, our Holy Fathers have led the Orthodox laity to gather in unison." Now he's defending activity in the public square, protest. "To gather in unison, both to preserve the faith from heresy from within and against major threats upon society from without. Indeed, we are in a unique position as Orthodox Christians in a nation governed as a democratic republic, for we still benefit from religious freedoms that allow us to freely voice with clarity the gospel message." And then he has hopes for this. "If we have several thousand Orthodox attendees from the ranks of our clergy, our monastics, and our laity at this peaceful rally, it would immediately be clear that the Orthodox Church is a leading voice for marriage in this nation, sending a clear message to the Orthodox faithful as well, who will be strengthened in the understanding of this mystery with love, and can be prepared to more completely manifest this gospel message to our nation. We must act now with great labor, asking the Lord to have mercy on us." And he goes on. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops issued a letter as well. It says, "This March for Marriage will be an opportunity to stand for the good of marriage in our nation, to pray for our Supreme Court justices, and to demonstrate our commitment to the well-being of children." This is what should make you mad. People argue, they say, you know what 2 consenting adults do in the privacy of their bedroom doesn't matter. That's not true. There's nothing in the Bible that says that. That is not the Christian truth. That is the delusion. 2 consenting adults do is impacting society. Just look around you. It's about children, see. Usually, we get angry for our selfish reasons. But it is not a selfish reason to get angry for the sake of children who are being deluded, perverted, and brought into great lifelong harm in their own understanding of who they are, as being raised by homosexuals. The Conference of Catholic Bishops say this march will demonstrate our commitment to the well-being of children. The anticipated decision of the Supreme Court positions itself to be the most important judicial ruling in our nation since 1973's infamous Roe v. Wade decision, declaring a constitutional right to abortion. The march is an important witness to a movement dedicated to building a culture of marriage and the family, and it serves to remind all people that a Supreme Court ruling will not decide the issue of marriage any more than Roe decided the issue of abortion. Even those who champion abortion have to admit that that issue is the issue that has divided our nation to this day over the past 40 years. And this will as well. You talk about further rending the country asunder. You read GLBT literature and they're talking about arresting Christians for saying sodomy is harmful. For just stating common sense. That sodomy is psychologically, physically, medically harmful. And others have released other things, but Metropolitan Joseph's letter was the wonderful one. Now, I just want to briefly, and admittedly inadequately because it's brief, address some objections that I've heard. Because Orthodox are unfortunately very used to hiding and want to be accepted, like an insecure child willing to compromise for his peers to accept him. Some people say, take marriage out of the realm of the government completely. That is not the answer. Civil unions are not the answer. What we as a society condone, what we as a society allow, affects all of us, every one of us. It's in the air. The reason God commanded the Canaanites to be wiped out utterly with every man, woman, and child, every animal, was because the demons infest the air. They were sacrificing children to Baal, murdering their own children, burning them alive. This does not please God. Innocent blood infests the ground. Cain is walking around. Where's your brother Abel? He's, am I my brother's keeper? Which is, of course, the selfish answer. And God says, the blood of Abel cries out to me from the ground. Our sins infest the air. There's a cloud of abortion and sodomy over America. If we could see with spiritual eyes, we would be shocked. You talk about pollution in Los Angeles. America can't even see straight because of the cloud. What we as a society condone or allow affects all of us. Civil unions are not the answer. Sodomy is not love. This is just common sense. I've counseled women whose husbands, whether it's heterosexual anal sex or whether it's homosexual anal sex, it's not healthy. It's not good for anyone. It only harms both the abuser and the abused, physically, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally. It is inhumane. It is unnatural. It is perverse. It is contrary to a constructive society. Historically, it ruins society when society becomes lax on this issue because we care about the person infested with same-sex attraction. The psychological malady that needs society's help to restore moral sanity and does not need and is not helped by society condoning this activity. People talk about you can't legislate morality, and that's a misunderstanding of what legislation is for. The whole reason for law is to legislate morality. The reason we have a law that you cannot shoplift is because shoplifting is immoral. The whole reason why we have a law that you cannot commit murder is because murder is immoral. That's what law is for, to establish over all society what is appropriate behavior and what is inappropriate, punishable behavior. This is why there are laws against rape and so forth. I could go on. And this is incidentally biblical teaching as well. In Romans 13, the Holy Apostle Paul, he says, rulers hold no terror for those who are moral, but only for those who act immorally. For the ruler is God's servant to do good. But if you do wrong, then be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. Talking about capital punishment. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. In fact, the whole purpose for government is the protection and the promotion of the good of society. It's a universally recognized function of government. That's what government is for, good government. Morality is essential for us to function. That's what civilization is based on. The Constitution specifically states this, giving Congress the authority, quote, to define and to punish offenses against the law of nations. Now, the law of nations is what the Catholics call a natural law. It means universal moral standards, the Ten Commandments. And just because a nation adopts the Ten Commandments does not mean it's imposing Christianity or Judaism on its citizens. Otherwise, how would we justify morals against lying, cheating, bigamy, rape, murder, etc.? The law has always been a vehicle by which any society described its most cherished moral and ethical beliefs. Our cultural values and sense of right and wrong are reflected in our laws. You could choose any civilization in history, good or bad, and you will see what the cultural values are, what right and wrong is, based on their laws. So laws against abortion, euthanasia, human cloning, destructive embryonic stem cell research, statutory rape, sodomy, adultery, fornication, these establish a cultural morality. Freedom does not mean, like 7-Eleven, having 24 choices of what soda pop you're going to ruin your health with. Freedom does not mean you're able to do anything you want. Go to a movie. Stand up in the middle of a movie and yell, "Fire!" and see what happens. See what happens. You can't do that. It is illegal. You go to jail. Liberty does not mean licensed for immorality. It never has. The law is for the promotion of the common good. The common good includes supporting fairness, honesty, integrity, family, marriage, protecting the weak and vulnerable, the elderly in our society, those who are terminally ill, the mentally disabled, all those that are being slaughtered now. Good government has an obligation to encourage civil virtue. In fact, that's what the Declaration of Independence invented. The three rights: the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness, just read the Founding Fathers. They're talking about the pursuit of virtue, not the pursuit of hedonism, not the pursuit of physical gratification. They're talking about the pursuit of virtue, which is assumed at that time, it no longer is, but assumed the pursuit of happiness is naturally the pursuit of the good, the right. Freedom does not mean being able to do anything your mind can think of. It's never meant freedom to do evil. So it's a false argument to pretend that this kind of absolute liberty is the only valid ideal, that matters of good and evil are irrelevant to public policy. With no transcendent moral order, law ultimately does nothing more than become a reflection of the human whim. Laws are changed however the polls dictate. And it's a circular thing because the polls are generated by media that support a certain kind of immorality. It is the government's role, as we have said, to support the good family, protect children, protect wives, and they have a vested interest in supporting families and marriages. But it is not the government's role to define what marriage is. Marriage is instituted by God. It's beyond the government's definition. So then, what is the church's role in all of this? It is the church's role to inform and influence the government. It is the church's role. It is your role because you are the church. The church is not this building. This building isn't going to influence anybody. The church is you. The church is me. It is your role to inform and influence the government regarding the good, the virtuous, what is common sense, what is morality, what is good for all, etc. The church needs to influence and inform all society. It is the duty of Christians then to influence society toward the good. Sodomy harms all. It even harms those not directly involved, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And the government has the duty to encourage natural, normal marriage and to discourage sodomy. Sodomy is abuse. Sodomy is an act of hate, not an act of love, and comes from a psychological malady which needs healing and honesty, not the blessing and the promotion of the government. Thomas Jefferson once wrote, "The care of human life, and not its destruction, is the first and only legitimate act of good government." Children need a mom and a dad. This is something so fundamental. This is something so witnessed to by every area of medical science. Children need a mom and a dad. Just ask any single mother trying to fulfill both roles at the same time and pulling her hair out for 20 years. Children need a father's role. Children need a mother's role. Homosexual unions provide neither. There are gender differences as part of our human nature. Countless studies have proven this. Homosexuals, God bless them, should never be allowed to adopt children. This is an unspeakable evil, to bring the innocent child into this. But our government is forcing that to happen. The largest adoption agency in the state of Massachusetts is a Catholic adoption agency, and it is no more, because the government said you cannot be an adoption agency unless you place little children whose psychology is molded in the first 5 years of their life, whose understanding of who they are, unless they place these little children in sodomite homes, unless they place these little children in lesbian homes. Words cannot express how evil this is. And silence is consent. Silence is consent. One of the founding fathers, Alexander Fraser Tyler, said, "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves money from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits for the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy." Sound familiar? Always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations has been 200 years. These nations have progressed through the following sequence: from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, and from dependency back into bondage. During the Byzantine Empire, they set up what is called a symphonia, a cooperation, not a separation. Incidentally, the Constitution doesn't have the separation of church and state either. That's not in the Constitution. You go find it. The first one who coined the phrase separation of church and state was Thomas Jefferson in 1818, and it was to a group of Baptists in order to assure them that the government was not going to stop them from exercising their religion. The Orthodox ideal is a symphonia, a respect and influence between the church and its message of morality and its message of societal values and what is good for all, and the state. They are independent. Once the church becomes the state, then you've got the Crusades and you've got what Rome had for the Dark Ages. Church had its own army, and so forth. You got the Inquisition. So they are independent in Orthodox view, the best form of government. They are independent, but there is a symphonia, a cooperation, a working together, and a clear and very strong influence of the church over the government. So I encourage you, along with Metropolitan Joseph, whose letter I'll put up on the bulletin board, is a wonderful letter. And I guess the Antioch Archdiocese is really moving on this. I'm really embarrassed that the OCA isn't doing a whole lot. Speaking out is a part of being Christ to those around us. Telling the truth. If your leg is infected with gangrene and it's about to fall off because it's so full of maggots and infested in you, I am not a Christian friend to you to pretend that doesn't exist. Say, hey, let's go dancing. You want to roller skate? Hey, let's go. Oh, your leg is fine. It looks perfect to me. In fact, I wish I had a gangrene leg too. It would be great. Everybody should get a gangrene leg. I am not being honest. I am not being Christ to you. Tell the truth. Speak the truth in love. Never in hate, in love. One gentleman shared this. I remember one pastor in particular who told me he didn't feel he had any business telling anyone abortion was wrong. He said, I should only tell people about Jesus. So I asked him, what if you came upon a man savagely beating his wife in an alley? Would you go up to him and just tell him about Jesus? Here he is beating his wife. It's bloody. He keeps going, like our movies teach our children to do, and against women. It should never have entered your eyes to ever see a man slap a woman. But there's so many movies out today where women are beaten. Why do you think domestic violence is on the rise? Would you go up to him? Jesus loves you, Herman. Or would you do what you could to stop him from beating his wife to death? I just saw a billboard yesterday. Stop child abuse. Has a picture of a lovely little baby. Says underneath it, report child abuse. This is the government telling you to report a neighbor, to report a friend who is abusing their child. That's a just law. I am obliged by the law, if I have any evidence whatsoever of child abuse, to report it, including statutory rape. Planned Parenthood doesn't follow that law. There are untold cases documented and lawsuits about Planned Parenthood giving an abortion to a 12-year-old because a 30-year-old man impregnated her, and keeping it quiet and not reporting it as their law says they must. In fact, there are recordings of clandestine pro-lifers going to a Planned Parenthood, and they explain, we won't tell anyone, just lie about your age, put down that you're 18. This is repeated across the 50 states. So anyway, this man says, would you walk up to that man and tap him on the shoulder and tell him about Jesus? Or would you first try to stop him from beating the woman and make sure she was taken care of? Eventually, this pastor said, well, he would first try to stop the man from harming the woman and make sure she was okay. I asked him, why would he not just tell the man about Jesus and not worry about his behavior? He said, because his behavior affects others. And that's why the church must speak out. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.